Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Breaking Brews podcast, a podcast focused on the business side of beer and what's driving today's thriving craft beer industry. Whether you're one of the thousands of people making craft beer what it is today, or just love great beer and want to know more about it, this show is here to cover everything from sales, marketing, branding, culture, and much, much more. The Breaking Brews podcast delivers real-life scenarios and experiences from industry professionals that will help your beer knowledge evolve. To tap into more great beer content, visit breakingbrews.com today. And now, the moment you've been waiting for. Let's get this session started. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Breaking Brews podcast. I am your host, Jason Sircone, and you are here for session 29 of The Word of the Poured. If you haven't done so already, there are 28 other episodes back in the archives. Jump back, take a listen. If you like what you hear, jump over to iTunes, drop a rating, drop a review, let me know how I'm doing with the podcast, and help the show find the ears of more thirsty beer professionals and thirsty beer enthusiasts just like yourself. Also, if you like the show, you can subscribe on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Google Play Music, and on Spotify, and you can check out the show notes and everything else you need to know about Breaking Brews Podcast over at breakingbrews.com/podcast. And finally, join the Breaking Brews Podcast Central Facebook group today for live videos, for extra discussions, for more insight on the show. And as Season 1 of the Breaking Brews Podcast comes to a conclusion, that will be where you need to go to stay connected before Season 2 gets underway. So as we get ready to wind down on Season 1 of the podcast, we are taking one more look at paid Facebook marketing. Today, I'm joined by Mr. Jim Mitchell, who is a digital marketer who has over a decade's worth of experience in the beer industry, works with several clients in a freelance perspective, helping them build ad campaigns, helping them get the most from their social media efforts. And Jim came on the show today to discuss paid Facebook marketing campaigns and how you can put this aspect of the most popular social media network on the planet to work for you. If you have not done so already, once you get done listening to Jim and I's conversation today, jump back in the archives. Session 25 is all about organic Facebook marketing with Kaylee Losey from Presidential Brewing. Session 26 gives you some more perspective on the paid Facebook marketing aspects that we cover today. All three episodes are going to give you a very well-rounded resource to help you start implementing good ad campaigns and producing good organic content through your Facebook pages. So I'd like to thank Jim, I'd like to thank Aaron and Kaylee for coming on the show over the last few weeks and really putting together a nice resource for Facebook. As we roll into Season 2, I'm looking forward to having some conversations about Instagram. We're going to look at Twitter. We're going to break down all of these social media networks for you so you can get the most from each. We really dove into Facebook because I felt as Season 1 concluded, I wanted to get that information out there for you. Lots to get to today. I'm going to let you guys get to it and step aside. We're once again diving into Facebook marketing, the paid aspects, and how you can get the most from your paid ad campaigns. Let's roll. This is Session 29 of the Breaking Brews podcast with Jim Mitchell. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back on the Breaking Brews podcast. As always, I am your host, Jason Sircone, and today I am joined via Skype by Mr. Jim Mitchell. Jim, what's going on, my friend?
Not too much. Enjoying the very overcast weather of Raleigh, North Carolina today.
Very cool. And that was actually, I'm glad you brought that up. I forgot to ask you before we started talking where you were located, but Raleigh, North Carolina, very good. You told me as we turned on the mics you were cracking open a beer. What is in front of you as we get ready to rock and roll on today's episode?
I was able to get my hand on some WeldWorks a few days ago, and I am drinking Advanced Fluid Dynamics, which features Lotus and Sabro hops, and so far so good.
First time experiencing that beer?
This one particular, yeah, I think WeldWorks does a lot of one-offs, so I think this may be one of them. So it's not too shabby.
Well, it's good we've got you properly fueled for today's episode. We are going to be rolling into some Facebook marketing initiatives, mainly sticking to the paid side of Facebook. If you want to learn more about the paid aspects of Facebook and advertising, obviously we're going to dive deep into that with Jim here today. You can also jump back in the Breaking Brews podcast archives to session 26. And Aaron Williams of Monday Night Brewing also took some time to share some great perspective about paid marketing and paid advertisements via Facebook. It's becoming more and more of a pay-to-play space, and we want to make sure that you guys are well equipped with the right information and the right tactics as you go into the paid marketing realm. So Jim has a lot of experience as a digital marketer, which is why he's on the show today. He's got a ton of experience with a bunch of different brands, so I'm going to let Jim tell the story of himself. Let's hear some background on you, my friend, before we dive into Facebook advertising.
So my background is I got started in local television and radio right out of college, doing making those terrible car commercials you see in the local markets. Mine were equally as terrible.
Let me ask you, not to cut you, Pittsburgh has a famous one. There's a jingle that we actually learned. The jingle is Century 3, Chevrolet, Lebanon, Church Road, Pittsburgh. And we found that there is another one exactly like it in California. Everybody in Pittsburgh's minds were blown. Do you have anything to do with those?
That, I can't take credit for that.
That one's over. Okay, good. Because it's so terrible, but you just get it stuck in your head. I just screwed up everybody for the show, too. They're going to have that crap stuck in their head now. You're welcome.
I never was involved in writing jingles.
Probably for the best, right?
Yeah, probably. You don't want me to sing them either.
Well, continue.
And then from there, I did a lot of stuff in different realms. That's about the time social media was coming online. So I was working with local clients and actually building out their Facebook pages before Facebook for Business even existed. So I was helping them put out content. Video and graphics and stuff like that way back before. I say way back, this is like 2007.
Seems like a long time ago.
I know, in terms of digital it is. And doing pay-per-click stuff, and I've done that for a number of different brands in and out of the beer industry. I've even done, retail side of beer and wine, ran some bottle shops, worked at a homebrew store, been brewing beer since I was legally able to buy it. Don't tell my mom. And then had the opportunity to work with Anheuser-Busch. I know this is a craft podcast, but I wanted to learn the industry from all aspects. So I had the opportunity to go work within the high end, and I did that. And I learned a ton of how to market your brand and how to get that out to people. And yeah, we had massive budgets, but there are always things that you can do without massive budgets that are incredibly effective. And so now I'm doing some other stuff for smaller clients in freelance marketing for small businesses, and that's where I'm at now. And I'm currently working on a project that I'm going to be announcing here hopefully in the next couple months, and maybe you have me back on and talk about that.
Yeah, keep us posted. I'd love to hear more. Give us a little bit of background about the high end and some of the things that you walked away from that position with.
What I really learned going into that is that they're not really the enemy. If you're considering them competition, you have to be putting out at least 60,000 barrels a year, so you're on supermarket shelves everywhere. If you're not on supermarket shelves, they're not your competition. So it's one of those things where when I look at small breweries and they're the enemy, like, dude, you're producing 2,500 barrels a year and it's all coming out of your tap room or a bottle shop. So they're not your enemy. the enemy is the beer nerd behind the counter that doesn't even want to talk to you because he has a friend that works at XYZ brewery and that's all he puts on. So you walk in and it's nothing but 10 and 12% weird IPAs that I can't understand why this is not selling. That's your enemy. People that are uneducated and don't know what's going on. That's what I learned. Or the real enemy is the craft beer. It's not the big guy because they're not thinking about you and you shouldn't be thinking about them.
Yeah, I think where that stigma stems from is the fact that they do a lot to choke off supply chains and make it a little bit more difficult to get your hands on supplies as a small brewer. Maybe not to the degree that it was a few years back, but I think that's where it's all stemmed from. At least that's how I look at it.
Yeah, and yeah, I think you're referring to like kind of those South African hops that quote unquote no one can get. Mm-hmm. You didn't want them anyway because they're not the best hops, and if you're not brewing beer specifically for those types of hops, it's like, what's the point?
Well, big beer, in my opinion, it has its place. Obviously, it's going to continue to have its place. We don't do a lot of talk about it here. One thing I know I mentioned on a past podcast is there's something to be said about a brewery or a brand that can make the exact same beer the exact same way in 5, 6, 7 different breweries all across the country. There's something to be said about the science behind that and how dialed in it is. And
There's an incredible amount of science that goes into it, and like now after this may be lore, but the myth that I heard was after they went to the 10 barrel, they came in and they actually cleaned up the 10 barrel yeast strain, and people were like, "This is different beer," so they actually made them go back to the old, well, quote unquote, dirty yeast strain that they had cleaned up, so they could just keep making the same, 10 barrel IPA Joe, so the people complained like it's not the same beer, so they made them go back to what they were doing.
well, you mentioned it before as well. Education is a major factor, and I think beer drinkers are finding podcasts like this, finding blogs, websites, resources, even going to breweries themselves and talking to the actual staff and ownership and the brewers about everything that they do. It's helping up that education, but I know I've mentioned this before too. I think we have a long ways to go, and we have to continue putting education out there and putting pieces out there that are going to help people learn, and hopefully the enemy side of it starts to go backwards and go into the night silently. We shall see.
Yeah, and I'm a big proponent in using education as a piece of marketing, and how to use that as to create content to be able to actually put that paid media behind it.
That's a good segue into jumping into Facebook and Instagram as well. For those that don't know, and I believe we talked about this if you jump back in the archives, session 25 and 26, also dedicated to Facebook. We lumped Instagram into the conversation as well because Instagram is owned by Facebook as of a few years ago, depending on when you're picking up this podcast. In regards to how you've implemented these into your practices, Jim, tell us a little bit about your freelance marketing efforts, some of the things that you do for your clients, and how have you put Facebook and Instagram to work in what you do for your clients?
Well, the first thing you need to do when you're doing anything like this is audit what you've already done. And if you're still paying money to separate places, if you're still paying money to both channels, you're doubling down on your efforts because they do own both and everything goes between both. So you can actually work in the business manager of Facebook to be able to do the spend once, as opposed to like, I'm going to spend $50 here and $50 here, where you can just spend $100 on Facebook and then you can push that out over Instagram, which is the best use of your time, in my opinion, as opposed to doing both at the same time, because you're spending money just to spend money at that point, where you can double down on Facebook and it will push that across channels. So I do an audit to make sure that that's not something they're doing. And if they are doing that currently, I bring them back in and I show them like, hey, look at this. You can, if you want to focus primarily on Instagram, you can do that through Facebook as well, but you want to have that crossover, because most people, if they're checking their Facebook, they probably have Instagram, and if you can get that frequency of visibility through both channels, you want that as much as possible so you can push whatever offer or contest or event that you're doing. So the first thing I do to get them on board with that is I show them the audit of what they're doing.
Is there an argument to be made that there are two different audiences, and that would be why you would spend money in one platform to do a different ad or a different campaign?
There is, and the argument that I would make to do that would be, I want to do an Instagram-only contest or a Facebook-only contest. So you're hitting, Instagram tends to skew younger, a little bit younger with their demographics. Not a whole lot if you look at the numbers, but it is a little bit younger. And that would be a good place to do that. Now, what I would do for that is I would actually put two different offers out on both channels and see, and kind of A/B test that between the two channels. And that would be a good argument for that. But a lot of people don't think of that. And they're just spending on both channels because like, oh, I didn't realize that was the case.
Before we jump into these paid initiatives full bore here, I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about the organic side. Now, do you utilize organic posts as well for your clients?
Yeah, so there's this thing called relevancy within different channels, and this exists across all digital channels, whether it's, AdWords or Facebook or Twitter or anything like that. You need to kind of gain your relevancy through a combination of organic and paid. You want to ramp up that organic, I would say, probably 3 months out before you start putting paid on there, because you want content, you want stuff that's interacted with. And what you can do with that is those are the posts that you're going to want to boost and try and test that, so you can actually build your relevancy score up within the algorithm, within Facebook's backend. And this is what Facebook doesn't tell you.
Yeah, right.
They are trying to build this relevancy because when they switched the algorithm a couple years ago, and they switched the algorithm all the time, they just try and, under the guise of we're creating a better user experience. No, they're creating that pay-to-pay space that you had mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. So organic is very important, and where that comes in is you don't want to be blasting people with sponsored posts all the time. One, it gets expensive, and two, if it seems non-organic, people aren't going to interact with it. So you want those organic posts to come up regularly, and you want them to play into what those sponsor posts are going to be. So trying to find that delicate balance between organic and paid is can be tricky. But if you watch, those digital tea leaves, and you watch what the interactions and the engagement is on that, you can figure out what kind of content's being interacted with and move forward in your paid from your organic. So the organic is very important to be able to engage those people that have followed or liked your different pages and channels. And then where that paid comes into is once that relevancy is there, they'll start to serve those ads to like audiences which tend to come off of who your friends and followers are on your page anyway.
How frequently do you recommend posting organically?
It depends. If you're located in a high density area, or you're trying to look at areas outside of where you're currently at, you can do some of those basic geo targeting things in Facebook and the different platforms. My feeling on it and what I've seen is it's between 2 and 3 times a week. It's nothing hardcore, because you don't want people to feel spammed. You don't want them to be turned off, because you can actually see, hide posts, hide all posts, all those things on the platform. So you want to be aware of that and try and make it so people aren't unfollowing you, because every time you're unfollowed, that's another audience or another group of people you're not going to get in front of, because it's everything on there is connected, and you have to realize that everything is connected. So my feeling is if you're in a population dense area, you can post a little bit more. But if you're not, if you're, say, let's pick a random city of Cheyenne, Wyoming. If you're in a city like a kind of that mid-level city that's a couple 100,000 people, I don't even know if it's a couple 100,000 people. This is just random numbers. But if you're in a small area like that, they're gonna feel like you're just spamming them because you feel like you have to post. But if it's, say, Phoenix, Arizona, where there's 3.4 million people within that metro area, between Mesa, Gilbert, and everywhere else, yeah, you can post a little bit more, because there's a lot more people that you have to reach, and you're not going to have a lot of those unfollows and hide posts and things like that.
It's amazing how that's changed too, because back before this algorithm really went into effect the way it is today, people were posting 2, 3, 4 times a day, and that was what most, like, if you would find a random marketing website that would talk about Facebook marketing and Facebook posting, they would recommend posting 3, 4 times a day. I think that was one of the big reasons why people got so turned off, was, good God, I got to sit here and post 4 times a day? Like, what the hell am I going to talk about that often? And then thankfully Facebook, when they change things around, you bring that frequency down, and if it's still a relevant post, it's going to find people, and that's really helped a lot for a lot of brands.
Correct. And I think you can still frequently post on Twitter. I think that's a channel that you can post frequently on, because I joke all the time, the only reason Twitter still exists is because of politics and trying to catch celebrities doing stuff they're not supposed to.
Oh man, Twitter is going to be another topic for another episode, because I still see a ton of value in Twitter. It's just finding the right way to harness it for your brand and put it into use. It's probably, of the 3, Facebook and Instagram, what we're rapping about today, it's probably the lesser of the 3 in the eyes of most.
Yeah, I would agree. And it does have its place. And like if you run a brew pub or a couple brew pubs, I think it's a great place to point people to. Or if you're going to be posting a picture of your daily menu, don't post a picture of your daily menu on Facebook if you can avoid it, because no one's going to see it, because that's going to go beyond what they recommend for their putting text on an image, because it will read that and the algorithm will kick it out. And even if it's organic, they won't tell you that, but it will kick it out and it will show it to less people because of the text that's on that.
I think. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and their recommendations always keep text 20% of the image or less. And that's
Right.
not how much text is on there. That's how much space the text is taking up.
I think you can get more from from an actual organic post that has something fun and engaging in the content with a nice picture, maybe of the special of the day. Get people to come in and check it out versus having that same daily post of here's, like you said, it's not going to be seen because Facebook won't make it visible if you have a ton of text within your photo. But B, if you were to see that every day anyway, you would just be like, all right, yeah, I get it. Saw that yesterday.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You want to make sure your content's engaging, and Facebook is now prioritizing video over anything else. So if, I would recommend if you are doing something like that, or if you have a bartender or a bar manager that's there all the time, and you probably do, and everyone knows them and everyone likes them. That's why they're still your bar manager. Put them on video if they're comfortable with it, and shoot it in 4x4. Do not shoot it vertical. Shoot it in 4x4 so it goes from Facebook and Instagram, and have them talk about whatever that daily special is or that new beer. Don't just put a picture of a beer on a bar. We've talked about this and how this irks me so, and call that content. It's not. You got to be able to engage people. And a picture of a beer, yeah, that might get you some big posts and stuff like that, or like the new can label you have, but make it engaging. Create something personal, and that's what that person that's behind the bar does for you. They create something personal, and that video, even if it is organic, is going to boost your organic relevancy score, which will then transfer over into your paid relevancy score.
So outside of doing the videos that you mentioned, what are some other ways that folks can generate engagement with their posts?
One really simple, easy, and free way is find the people that are posting about your brewery in the brewery or at an account or wherever, and they're enjoying your product and they're tagging you. Share that as quickly as you can, and what that does is it will show it to more people that are their friends, and then that kind of spider webs out. So using other people's content that they create for you, just make sure you tag them in it, do whatever you need to do to give them credit for it, but use that user created content. It's the easiest way to do it. It's the easiest way to create content that's going to be engaging, that's not coming from you as like a push of what you're trying to do. So organic content like that is huge, and then it also ends up boosting your organic relevancy score, which again will help you down the road when you start to go do paid stuff.
And when you look at that user-generated content, half the work's done for you.
No, and a lot of these people are taking pictures are really good at what they're doing.
Yeah, no doubt.
But make sure you're if you're sharing that content, make sure you're sharing that content across a wide range of demographics. You'd like it because you can turn off a lot of people immediately if you just start showing the same type of person every time. Make sure you let people know that you're not just a 23-year-old person's bar or a whatever the demographic is. So just make sure you're posting and you're being as inclusive as humanly possible with that, because it will bring in people that you wouldn't necessarily would come in.
Now, before we started, guys, I'd said to Jim that a few of these episodes have gone into rants about dirty glassware, and I wasn't sure how we were going to segue into that if we were at all on this episode, and I just found a way. So, and this has been talked about on past episodes. You can hear these in a couple of the past marketing episodes. This is one of the reasons why you want to make sure the glasses that you pour beer in and give to your customers are clean, they are presentable, because if they are going to be taking pictures to put on the internet, you want to make sure it's presentable and they look good. You don't want to get that reputation that you're serving beer in a dirty glass. But at the same time, if you're going to use that user-generated content on your own network, that just reciprocates, and it could make it twice as worse. So clean glassware. Can't preach it enough.
Make sure you're monitoring what those people are doing too. You don't want to be putting something out that's like, that's going to get you in trouble.
Yeah, understandable. Yeah, that's definitely a good point, guys. Well, let's jump into this paid aspect. So I know you touched on this a bit earlier, but in a more general sense, when do you feel is the best time to spend money to advertise on Facebook, on Instagram, or a combination of the two?
If you're just posting, if you want to push the weekly trivia night, that's something that I would go organic with. if you have a big event that you're doing, that's the best time, in my opinion, to do, because you can set those events up in Facebook on the back end. So if you're doing a major event, Facebook would be your best bet to spend on, because you can actually set it up where they're buying tickets through Facebook to your event or your bottle release or whatever it is. That would be a great example of when to spend money on Facebook. On Instagram is a great place to hold contests. Just make sure you know what your state and local laws are when you're doing a contest on Instagram or Facebook or anywhere really. A lot of states have laws against advertising alcohol or saying free alcohol or giving away alcohol or anything like that. So just make sure you're staying within the guidelines of your state law when you're doing contests. But Instagram's a great place to do giveaways and spend money there to do those promotions. So if you have like a special glassware release with a special beer, that's a fantastic place to put it, because it is a visual medium, and that's a place where a picture of a beer in that glass is going to be most effective. So it's a combination of knowing what your content is and where to put it. So if you're trying to do things that are more e-commerce driven, I would definitely recommend Facebook. If you're doing giveaways and things like that, I would really recommend anything that's visual goes on Instagram. To that effect, you can do A/B testing where you're seeing which one works for your particular audience, and spending a little bit of money on one and then a little bit of money on the other, and just making sure you got to make sure you're spending enough money, because they have the bidding process through Instagram and Facebook, where if you're not spending enough, or if you spend too little money, you're obviously not going to get the higher bid. It's the same thing with AdWords on Google, where you're actually bidding for space so you can get that visibility. So you want to make sure you have a time frame that you can A/B test that. So I think $25 for a couple of hours is a good place to drop your money to A/B test who's going to be more interactive, and then you can up your spend later on those particular channels once you see which one's working the best for you. If you don't want to sit there and watch the bidding process yourself, which I've done, and it's not fun. Yeah. But yeah, anything visual that's incredibly visual heavy, obviously Instagram's the way to go. You have definitely a longer format where you can put longer videos and things like that on Facebook, and larger format videos on Facebook. That is changing a little bit with Instagram stories and Instagram TV, but I haven't experimented with the Instagram TV spend yet, so that might be something to look at in the future as that evolves and changes. But yeah, that would be my recommendation is anything that's super visually heavy, go Instagram. Anything that's kind of more block text or e-commerce driven, I would go with Facebook right now. You can do e-commerce stuff through Instagram, and it just kind of reroutes you back to a Facebook like purchasing page. But that would be my recommendation on where to spend on those sorts of things.
Yeah, you had touched on Instagram TV, and I was going to ask you if you had dabbled in that yet, because I'm just starting to get into it myself, putting up some organic videos. I'm liking it, and I'm thinking it's something that down the road I'd like to dive into more, and I'm hoping by the time we do an episode of this podcast with just Instagram in mind, we'll have somebody that has had some time to utilize that network and see if there are good ways for us to get results. So stay tuned, everybody.
Instagram TV is interesting. I find myself watching a lot of barbecue and food videos on there now. It's kind of Instagram's version of Facebook Live, which I don't think Facebook Live took off the way people thought it was going to.
Yeah.
Because you have to sit there to create that lead in so people know you're live. I mean, you got to turn that thing on like an hour before so people start getting those notifications. And everyone turned off their notifications on Facebook Live.
Yeah.
So it was a good concept that I think works better on the Instagram platform, because people are trained to go towards things that are visual on Instagram.
Well, and there's so many ways that you can get that video out to somebody on Instagram. You can put it, and not to say that you can't do this on Facebook, because you can share a live video, but typically after it's done. And with Instagram TV, you're not really making a live feed, but you can put a preview on your grid. You can put it in your stories. You can put it in your highlights. There's a ton of different ways to have that video get found by someone. So I think that's where the power is going to be with that as it continues to evolve.
That and the video and audio quality on the Instagram TV and videos is way better, because you can have pre and post production on those, where Facebook Live you can't. I do come from the world of video production as well, where I can tell you your audio is just as important, if not on some level more important than your visual, because a lot of people will turn it off immediately if they can't hear what you're trying to say or what you're doing. So that's the other thing. Just because your kid has an iPhone and a MacBook doesn't mean that's the best way to create your content if you don't have all the other pieces in place. So I hear it all the time. I give advice to people and they're like, "Well, my kid can do that. He has an iPhone." I was like, "All right, well, good luck. Good luck getting people engaged with that."
Yeah, that's step one. You're off to the races, I guess. I've always wondered about Facebook Live too, because I had experimented with doing a series a couple years back that it really didn't pan out for many of these reasons that we've already talked about today, Jim. But I tried to treat it like a TV series where I did ads and I did promotions leading up to the season premiere, quote unquote, and that one got the most views and that one had the most interaction. But as I went forward with it, it just got less and less, and I still did it the same way in regards to the promotion, but it just maybe people just weren't interested in what the conversations were. I really couldn't pinpoint it. I ended up going to a Facebook seminar, and I talked to somebody who was having some success with a Facebook series, and she told me that I wasn't doing it frequently enough because I was doing it bi-weekly. She was doing hers 10 minutes a day every week. 10 minutes once a week, every week. And she said that seemed to be the magic formula for her. I don't know if there is a magic formula with this, but I think the whole live aspect of Facebook and Instagram that's where it's going. I think there's just so much that you can accomplish with those platforms.
With that, if you're doing something that's episodic and you're not releasing it at the same time on a regular basis, same day of the week, same time, and I think that's what a lot of people like, well, we did a Facebook Live and no one really paid attention. It's like, yeah, because you did it once, and maybe you'll do it again in a couple months, but you don't tell anyone you're doing it. You just do it. So of course no one's going to pay attention. It's like when, NBC releases a new show, they don't just release it and not tell anyone.
Right.
They put campaigns behind it, and,
right.
and they tell you for 6 months leading up to it. They do press releases about the actors that are going to be in it. So they do all these things to build up the hype around it so people actually want to tune in, and they make sure they let you know when it's going to come on. And they, you look at what Fox does on their TV shows. This is going off on a tangent, but it does tie back. So you look what the network Fox does. And they had all those issues, and they still have these issues where they would change their schedules around. Like, why can't we get these really good shows to take off? It's because you put Family Guy on a Tuesday, then you moved it to Thursday, and then they cancel it in 1998 and brought it back in 2001 or something. But
yeah,
you have to train people. And we were talking about the education as a marketing piece. It's like you have to educate people, you have to train them, and you have to get them to recognize who you are. And going back to everything else we've talked about, you got to mix the organic with the paid. You got to do a little bit of reading, and you got to do a little bit of testing, because that's basically what marketing's all about: getting into a groove. And then once you hit a groove, keep doing that thing that gets you in a groove for a while you're testing other things out to engage new audiences.
I couldn't agree more. And I think having the patience too is key. You can't just do one live video, expect the entire world to tune in, and when they don't, say, "Well, this sucks. I'll never do this again."
And I hear that all the time. Well, we did it for 3 weeks. Right. That's not going to do it for you.
No, it doesn't work that way. I mean, you look at a lot of these established networks, they took months and years to build, and it was just consistency. And that's why when I'm talking to anybody about social media marketing, that's the number one term that I use is consistency. If you choose to do posting every day, be consistent. Do it every day. If you choose to do it every other or 3 days, just be consistent about when you're putting content out there so people get into a groove of their own, knowing when they are going to see content from you. And when you do it, make sure it's something that's engaging. If you're just doing it a couple times a week, don't put fluff out there. Put something out there that's really going to captivate the audience. Whether it be video, photos, or a combination of both.
Yeah, and I think now we're entering into a point where there's more fluff than substance being put out. across social in terms of content and how they use those channels to build a brand. I mean, this is across industries, but it's particularly bad right now, I believe, in the craft industry where it's all fluff. It's like, yeah, everyone loves a cute dog, but if you get one hit on a cute dog picture and everyone loves it, the next ones you put out the next day, the engagement's going to diminish because you did the same thing that day. It's like if you have like a weekly thing where you post the dog of the week, that's cool. Everyone's going to love that. The person's dog is going to get shared out. Their friends are going to share that out, and you're going to hit someone that's like, oh, I didn't know that brewery was on at 124 Main Street and yada yada city. So it's one of those things where you got to do those things, but you can't put out the fluff. And if you do something, you can't keep doing that same thing every day because it will turn people off and they will unfollow you.
All right, well, let's dive into the actual construction of an ad. So let's start with the imagery side of it. Now, we'd already discussed how if you are putting an ad or even an organic post that you're not going to put any money behind, you don't want to put an image that has a lot of words because Facebook will not make that visible. So, the question for you, Jim, is if I'm going to use one or more image in my ads, what are the best approaches that you've experienced that will get the best results for the image that you utilize?
To quote Dwight Schrute from The Office, put the money beats up front.
Well played. Those are the money beats. I like it.
Put your best image first, whatever you think that is and whatever tells the best story for that ad. Make sure the copy plays to that first image and always try and keep that copy above the fold. You don't want people to try and have like that see more thing that shows a lot. Make sure it's most consistent across devices. So you want to figure out how much text can go in that box. You want to make sure it plays to that first image that you're showing, and you want to make sure it's cohesive to your brand itself. So if you had another campaign that you've run or you've done other things, do your best to try and connect that campaign, paid or organic, back to something else you've done just a little bit so people get that consistency and that continuity through your brand itself.
Are you looking for a better way to attack your social media efforts? Do you need help developing a plan that will help you maximize your initiatives? Do you feel like you're doing nothing but wasting time on sites like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then it's time for a jumpstart. Check out the Breaking Brews Social Media Jumpstart and discover an easy way for us to join forces and take your business to new levels. From a complete analysis of your current presence to an intensive strategy session designed to develop and execute your plan of attack, the Social Media Jumpstart is a great way to build a foundation that will lead to long-term results. To learn more, visit www.breakingbrews.com/jumpstart today. All right, now, when you see a great ad, more times than not, it contains video. And you'd already mentioned, Jim, that right now Facebook is putting a big priority on video. What are your recommendations for utilizing video in ad campaigns?
All right, so they do measurements of 3 seconds, 6 seconds, and 10 seconds. I would keep your video between 15 seconds or below to be able to hit those things because their relevancy scores are based on those 3, 6, and 10 seconds unless they've changed it in the last, 3 weeks.
Which is entirely possible.
A video completion used to be on Facebook as if they watched 10 seconds of that video, depending on how long the video was. So my recommendation was if you're doing an ad, make sure it's with video, make sure it's short, make sure it tells a little bit of a story, and make sure your branding is visual at some point, usually at the beginning so people know who you are. But yeah, the main thing is keep it, I would say 15 seconds, and make sure the copy again matches what you're showing and keep that copy above it. So you don't get penalized with video if there's text on that. So if you feel you need some text on that video, go for it. But from a stylistic standpoint, I minimize that amount of text. Keep it to a logo, keep it to what's actually in the video, whether that's a can of beer with your logo and the name of the beer on it. Err on the side of caution. If you wouldn't be engaged with that video, don't post it, because if you're not engaged with it, chances are the people that would be engaged with you aren't going to be engaged with it anyway, and they're not going to remember it. They're going to gloss over it, and they're going to keep going. They're not going to stick and stay around for the entire 15 seconds. and keep using those videos. They're for the most part, people aren't changing their branding every year. So those things can be evergreen, and you can bring them back, especially if they're seasonal. So if, say, like you're Coronado Brewing, you're out there in San Diego, and you have a video of someone surfing and drinking Weekend Vibes or whatever on the beach, that can come back around every year, especially when you're showing that video to a non-warm climate that gets warm, and then people want to go to the beach, and it makes them to remember to, oh yeah, I drank Weekend Vibes last summer. Let's boost the sales on that and get that into that market.
I think a good rule of thumb is to think like a consumer when you're creating these videos and ultimately building an ad campaign around them, because we're inundated with 10, 15-second videos pretty much everywhere we turn. You go on YouTube, and now they're playing multiple ads on you at a time. And you want to make sure that what you're putting out there is something that, and Jim mentioned this, that people are going to be engaged with. They're going to want to see it. They're going to not keep scrolling. Ultimately, you want to put something out there that's going to generate that pause where people can stop and actually watch and absorb what you're offering, hopefully looking to take that next step. And having a call to action in the ad is also super important. I'm sure we'll talk about that too when we get into the construction. But yeah, you want to make sure that your thoughts and your entire motive is building something that people are going to actually want to see, and think of it just as if it was being put in front of you.
And you definitely want to have that brand through line as well. If you don't have that continuity of brand, it's a lot easier for people to like not recognize the visualization. It's a lot easier to not recognize the branding, and you always want to be top of mind as much as possible when you're in the consumer's mind. So putting out content that is recognizable to your brand is also incredibly important.
No, something I want to talk about, it's in connection with what we've been discussing at this point, but I know that I've talked to people that sometimes don't see the difference between a boosted post and an actual ad, and I want to make sure that we are discussing the differences between the two and why each are relevant and why it's important to know that each are going to get you different results. So tell us the difference between a boosted post and an actual ad campaign.
So a boosted post is something that you put out organically, and then it starts to gain some traction is when you get the recommendation from Facebook to boost that post. So a boosted post is something you put out organic. You get that notification like, oh, you could reach 15 to 3,000 people if you boost this post for $25. So that's a boosted post. It's something that's already been created, and then Facebook sees that you're getting some traction on it, or in terms of versus your other content that you've put out. An actual ad that you're doing is you're going into the back end of Facebook, the business manager, and you're creating an ad where you're going to have more control over who sees it, what demographics see it, what goes into it, how the frequency of it, where you can turn it on and off during certain hours and turn it back on when you want people to see it. And you're actually putting your money and determining your budget over time with it, versus the boosted post where it's kind of a one-time thing where, like, if you boost this for however much you'll reach this many people. And the organic relevancy score for the boosted posts are much higher, but your likelihood of that actually giving you any kind of boost, from what I've seen, is not all that great.
Let's talk about the boosted post aspect for a second too, because as you said, Facebook will make that recommendation, and sometimes you can go into an organic post knowing that you're going to boost it for X amount of dollars, whether it gets traction or not. That said, do you feel there is a good time to utilize a boosted post other than when Facebook recommends it?
If you put out a post that performs well organically, and it usually works well with events. So that would be when I boost something, or if you just want a little bit of a kick in the pants for something, you don't have to spend a lot. It's one of those things where you got to play it by ear, in my opinion. Once Facebook suggests something, it's kind of like when you go to a shady mechanic and they're like, this, and this are going wrong, so I suggest you fix that now. It's kind of, to me, that's the recommendation you're getting from Facebook at that point. They see something that's working well that they didn't come up with, but you're not going to get the results that they say you're going to get. So it's when they say you could reach 45,000 people if you spend $300 on this boosted post, but you're not going to reach those people. They're going to do everything they can to not let you get to those people, because that's what their algorithm does at that point. Because they had to convince you. It took them time. It took somebody. Yeah, it's probably their AI at this point. But when they suggest those things, it's not because they have your best interest at heart. they want your money, and that's what that is. So that's why I always recommend if you have that, if you do want a little bit more of a kick on something, yeah, then by all means do what you feel is right. But as soon as that recommendation comes through, I'm always just like, nah.
Yeah, very rarely do I jump on those, and it depends. I mean, if I see that it's getting more interaction than a typical post that I put out there, then yeah, I'll throw a few bucks at it as well. One thing I will say for Facebook in their defense, and I know I talked about this on the past Facebook episodes, is that yes, they want your money, but they are very good about trying to educate you as a business owner so you can invest properly, invest wisely, get some return on your investment. So they get their money, but they're not trying to just steal it from you and black hat cowboy you so you don't get anything back in return.
Yeah, with Facebook, the number that it used to be to get an actual person human on the phone from one of their subcontractors that could help you out was about 10 grand of spending a month. Mm-hmm. So most breweries aren't going to spend 10 grand a month on social media. So if you ever try and get customer service after you've spent money with Facebook, you're not going to get it.
Have you encountered with your clients that more of their advertising spend that they may have dedicated to, say, a newspaper ad or a magazine ad is now being shifted more towards Facebook?
They always want to come to you and say, well, this is dying, and this is the way things are going. And yes, so the shift has because you can't tell people to do something they don't want to do. So they come and they say, yeah, I want to spend all this money on social media. I'm like, that's great, but you have to plan this out before you spend money on that. Mm-hmm. So there is a shift towards that. But in terms of people taking away from the traditional marketing, I don't think a lot of breweries, until they get to a certain point, they weren't putting money in radio or TV or anything like that in the first place. I've seen a couple of rarities pop up where breweries are spending money on billboards, and I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, like, where are you getting this cash? Because I know that CBS billboard is $8,000 to $12,000 a month,
right?
And that's a lot of people's marketing budget for 6 months,
certainly. and I mean, I don't know. I haven't exactly studied billboard advertising in regards to ROI lately, but I'd have to think. I mean, it's clearly out of your control much more than a Facebook ad campaign is.
Correct, and to get that frequency on a billboard, you have to put up a lot of billboards. I mean, there are some of these media groups that'll have those billboards geofenced, and they can tell you the traffic count of the people driving by based off of device ID when they're driving past the billboard because they have Bluetooth beacons or whatever connected to the billboard. But that doesn't mean that person's recognizing that billboard. That just means they're driving by.
Right. Yeah, and I'm always driving high speeds, and you come across a billboard that has a ton of words. It's like, well, how the hell am I getting? Or the ones that rotate, where you're getting 3 or 4 ads. I'm driving. I got to pay attention to the road here. You talk about texting and driving. We're trying to read an ad on a billboard.
Yeah, and you would think the digital billboards are more expensive than the static ones, but it's actually the opposite because you don't have the ability to have that static image burned into somebody's brain.
Yeah, we've come a long way from the chew mail pouch tobacco on the side of a barn, haven't we?
And I've been seeing breweries put out the yard signs, like the political campaigns size yard signs on places where you're driving 25 miles an hour plus past them. It's like no one's explained visual acuity to you. Have they?
Yeah, it just seems logical that today's money should, I mean, again, having a plan to spend it wisely is the way you have to go, but having it directed more at the resources where people, their eyes are there multiple times a day, you're going to get better results from what you can put in front of somebody on their smartphone versus what you can put on the side of a highway or the side of a road.
100%.
Not to dive too much into this because I know we've talked about Ad Manager. It's obviously the spot where you want to go to track the results of your ads to see how they're performing. You can download an app or the Ads Manager app through Facebook as well. So if you are managing multiple campaigns, you can have it all built into the app. You can get results notifications sent to you. I usually wake up to them every morning, which is, I'm a nerd like that. We talked more about this back on session 26, but I wanted to get your feedback, Jim, on when do you make adjustments to the ads that you put out there?
In terms of adjustments, the only thing that I would adjust is spend or cutting it on or off. You never want to adjust what's in the ad, because what that does is, again, kills your relevancy score. Like once you have 500 impressions on something, that's when stuff really starts to take off. And every time you change an ad in terms of the content, the copy, the visuals, anything like that, or the demographics of what you're targeting, you kill it immediately, and you start right back over from where you were. And the only thing that doesn't change that is if you adjust spending up or down. So you never want to change the physical ad itself. The only thing you want to make sure that's what you want to put out, and don't touch it. Because if you touch it, you're just going to start and stop and kill yourself with that. And then you're going to run into that loop of like, well, I did this. That's what everyone said you're supposed to do. Like, yep, but you cut off your nose to spite your face because you found a spelling error. You did something. So have eyes on that. Make sure what you're putting out, even organically, that's something they don't tell you, is if you adjust that organic post and they do track those edits, they'll stop serving that and stop showing that to people. So I only adjust spending. I do my best to make sure that everything is put into that campaign perfectly from the outset.
Yeah, I think you're going to, obviously from that perspective, it makes much more sense if an ad is not performing to just take it down and go back to the drawing board.
Correct.
Just trying to make little tweaks here and there.
If you're spending $100 a day on an ad, but you're sitting there 4 times a day changing stuff on it to make it work, it's not going to happen.
I think we've reached a point in our lives or in our culture and society that hashtags are just part of the vernacular. You see it on every social network. You see it in it doesn't matter where. Hashtags are all over the place. I know from a marketing perspective, Instagram, Twitter, they have relevance. Facebook tried to get in on that game a few years back. Nothing really happened, but you still see an inordinate amount of hashtags being utilized on Facebook. Some of them being used ironically, some of them being used to where it looks like someone might actually be trying to get some results from them. What are your thoughts on the use of hashtags on Facebook?
If you're using a hashtag ironically, you just sound like a jerk. Hashtag, people don't understand that when a couple of years ago, Facebook changed it where you don't need hashtags. You can just keyword search. So just throwing hashtags at something, thinking that someone's going to search, like you just made up 17 hashtags that no one cares about. Mm-hmm. So I would 86 the hashtags unless you're doing something like a contest where you want to be able to track that hashtag so you can go find the people that have tagged you with that hashtag as part of a giveaway or whatever. By all means. Hashtags have basically gone by the wayside because of the keyword search power of the platform itself. So using a hashtag, I see it all the time. These new breweries, they think hashtags do something, but they don't. And in all actuality, from what I've been told, they're actually hurting your various relevancy scores to do that.
Oh, really?
Okay. Yeah, I can't confirm that, but that's what I've been told by people that work at a couple of different subcontractors for Facebook.
Okay, well that's good to know. And I know I haven't made a habit out of using hashtags on Facebook. I've heard multiple reports about how to use hashtags on Instagram. And what is your approach with Instagram in regards to hashtags?
You can still put a hashtag on there, and because there's no keyword search on Instagram. But making up hashtags to just make up hashtags because you think that's a thing, what's the point of that? You're just taking up text. It doesn't do anything unless you're trying to create a hashtag that people can tag you in so then you can share their content out. That would be the only purpose behind that. they don't do anything because you're not creating a movement. You're just, hashtag drink local.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's probably one that would work. But if someone hashtags drink local, you could be in Maine and and someone else that's they're not. No one cares that you're in Maine. If I'm in Washington,
Yeah, there's a lot of. I mean, I think to some degree it can help filter a little bit of the noise out there, but you have to be deliberate in how you utilize your hashtags. So you have to look at what kind of traction are they getting? Is it specific to my business? Am I going to be hitting my audience? And like you said, Jim, you could be hitting people from across the country. Now, if you're just looking to raise some brand awareness and want to get some information out there, then it could be something that's more on a nationwide, broader scale. But to keep it targeted to where it's going to ultimately drive people to your business, you got to make sure you're using the right words and researching them to see what kind of relevance they have.
correct. And I can tell when I look at these posts and I like out of just morbid curiosity, I will click on the hashtags to see if anything comes up with that. And 99% of the time, nothing comes up at all. So research what hashtags are being used if you're going to use them, and sure, use those. But in long term, no one cares.
Well, other than our chat today, which I think we've covered some good ground for everybody to attack Facebook ads and even go at your organic posting and Instagram as well. There's a lot to be unpacked from this episode, but what other resources would you recommend to aspiring advertisers to get the most from their efforts on Facebook and Instagram?
Really focus on your content. It's everyone's you don't yeah, there's going to be some element of everyone looks the same, but if you can figure out a way to make your content look different, whether that's the quality, most craft breweries are working on that hyper local level. So if you can make yourself stand out by putting out higher quality content than everyone else that's around you, the brewery that's 5 miles down the road, if they're putting out garbage content that's not engaging, make sure that you're putting out content that isn't garbage and is engaging. And in terms of spending your money, spend a couple minutes, watch a couple of YouTube videos that show you how to use the business manager and the ad builder, and just spend some time to learn how to use that so you're not throwing your money down a wishing well with boosted posts. And just remember, everything takes time. Everything takes time. You didn't start your brewery overnight. You didn't start your business overnight. You had to go through permitting. You had to go through dealing with your city. You had to go through dealing with the TTB. You had to go through all of that. So just remember, just like that, marketing takes time. It's a long play. It's not a short play. Yes, you can do some short hit things that are going to help you in the near term. But over time, if you want a successful brand, you have to build it and you have to spend the time and put in the effort to be able to do that. And in terms of being hyper local, it's a lot easier to be hyper local than it is national. And look at what other industries are doing in terms of their content and what success they're doing, like successful like pieces that they're putting out, and see if you can do things like that. But tailor it to what you're doing. Don't be a copycat.
Well said. And I think another thing I'd like to throw on there in regards to resources, yeah, of course, YouTube is always going to be good. You can just Google best practices for Facebook advertising, and you'll get a ton of results for that. But as you get rolling with Facebook advertising, you'll actually be notified by someone from Facebook where you can set up a call where they can help walk you through the ads that you've already produced and how you can get results from, or get better results from your future ads. So they're there to help. I mentioned it before. They do want your money, but they want to make sure that you do get a return for it. So in addition to creating a good user experience, they're also trying to make it a good advertiser experience as well.
I agree 100%.
All right, Jim. Well, again, this has been some great content, and I'd like to once again thank you for joining me on the Breaking Brews podcast today. If anybody listening to the show would like to connect with you, where can they find you on the internet?
They can shoot me an email. That'd be great. We'll go with the one I actually checked, jpmitch83@gmail.com, jpmitch83@gmail.com.
If you have any follow-up questions from the points that Jim covered today, you can shoot him an email and get some further insight. Jim, thanks again, my friend. How'd that beer turn out?
It was delightful. So
You going to go in for number 2 now?
Good job, Well Works. What time is it? 2 o'clock on the East Coast?
Yes, sir.
Yep. I might I might run down to the bottle shop and talk to some friends. We'll see what happens.
Now that we're wrapping up, I think I'm going to do the same thing. All right, Jim, good talking with you. Thanks.
You too, sir.
All right, and there it is. That is session 29 of the Breaking Brews podcast. Again, I'd like to thank Mr. Jim Mitchell for joining me on the show and sharing his perspective on paid Facebook marketing campaigns. Some good information here, as well as sessions 25 and 26. So get your Facebook campaigns rocking and rolling today with the information that Jim shared. Also, like I said, jump back in the archives and check out sessions 25 and 26. Some good stuff put together for you guys to help you attack Facebook with more confidence. Again, a big thank you to Jim for sharing his perspective. Hope you guys are able to take some of his tips and strategies and put them to work for you today. So here we are, one session left as we get ready to wrap up Season 1 of the Breaking Brews podcast. And I had mentioned this last week as we wrapped up Session 28. I could think of no better way to wind down this season than to have an entire session dedicated to the importance of clean, beer-ready glassware. If you're a loyal listener of the Breaking Brews podcast, you know this has been a rant that's broken out several times. And I figured, what the hell, we need to talk about this more. And ultimately, we're hoping that we can put an end to this epidemic and more bars, breweries, tap rooms, bottle shops, anybody that's pouring beer and presenting beer, even you at home as an enthusiast, when you're pouring beer and taking that picture for Instagram, we want to make sure these pictures look good. You are backhandedly representing a brewery. I know I've mentioned this on the show before. If you're supporting them by purchasing their beer and you're taking a picture, you owe it to them to do it in clean glassware just as much as they owe it to you to serve you clean glassware when you frequent their establishment. So I'm going to be joined by none other than Dev Adams, who is an advanced Cicerone living in Colorado just outside of Denver, who has many years of experience in the beer industry. And Dev is just as passionate as me about this subject. So we're going to have a great conversation about the importance of clean glassware, why this is so overlooked in tap rooms across the country. Again, I've seen this defended in different Facebook conversations. I've seen people say it's no big deal. I've even seen people that have posted pictures for certain breweries not even realize that it's a dirty glass. And that really speaks volumes as to why we continue to see this. So, do I think we're going to solve this problem with one podcast? Hell no. But I feel that if we keep talking about it and we keep spreading education and helping people understand why this is so important, it can only make things better. So the season finale of the Breaking Brews podcast, Session 30, will be me and Dev Adams talking about clean glassware, why it's important, and why every time you are serving a beer or taking a picture of a beer, it should be done so with a clean glass. Session 30 is going to be a lot of fun, guys. But before Session 30 goes live, you've got time to jump back in the archives and check out all of the episodes that you may have missed. If you like what you hear, jump over to iTunes, drop a rating, drop a review, share an episode with a friend on social media. Tell everybody that you're listening to the Breaking Brews podcast. Help the community grow. Every effort you take, I could not appreciate it more. Thank you very much for being a listener, and thank you very, very much for helping me find more folks that will enjoy this show. Stay up to date on the show over at breakingbrews.com/podcast. You can check out show notes there. You can click the subscription links and subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and Spotify, and join the Breaking Brews Podcast Central Facebook group. After next week's episode, there won't be any new shows for a few months, so if you want to stay connected to everything I'll be doing outside of these recordings, that's going to happen on the Podcast Central Facebook group. Go join today. Session 29, officially in the history books. Next week, season finale, clean glassware, and the mothers that love it. I'm your host, Jason Sircone. This has been the Breaking Brews podcast. We'll see you next week. As always, this has been the Word of the Port.